The Last of Us HBO series is a show that no matter how many times I play the game or how many times I watch these episodes, I am brought to the edge of my seat or taken on an emotional roller coaster that is so intense, I have to excuse myself so that I don't cry in front of the other people in the room with me. And these last two episodes have been, how do I say this, just absolutely phenomenal. Everything about Joel and Ellie's story is just so goddamn good, I don't know what to do with myself. And after finishing the Part 1 remaster and getting to experience this story again in a semi-new light, of course, it's just really allowing me to fall in love with this tale in a new and fresh way. But before diving into it, I was out of town last week, so I missed posting about episode 5, so if you want to skip ahead to the episode 6 discussion, timestamps will be down below the like button and on the screen for you. So let's jump into it. Now, I could tell from episode 4 that we were in for a treat, but this episode exceeded nearly every single expectation I had and then some. It was an absolute banger, as the hip kids say. So I don't know how I missed this in my last episode's review, but I didn't understand that Kathleen was searching for Henry. I don't know how I missed it. I just wasn't really thinking about it. I felt like the story was a little disconnected. It wasn't that big of a deal. Obviously, we know that Kathleen is obsessed with finding Henry, but I don't know why. I just misheard her, and I thought she said she was looking for Harry, not Henry. I'm an idiot, basically, is what this all boils down to. So that's why I was a little confused with her obsession for revenge during episode 4, and it's a lot more clear during episode 5. So episode 4 ended with Henry and Sam holding Joel and Ellie at gunpoint, but rather than starting us off right where we stopped, Jeremy Webb, the director of this 2-part episode, took us to a time just slightly before the arrival of Ellie and Joel, when the resistance movement that is led by Kathleen takes over the Fedra camp. Apparently, it's a long time rumor that the Fedra camp in Kansas City was known for some awful human rights violations. I don't even know if those exist in this world, but that's what they were known for. And Kathleen and her men, who are part of a resistance movement, eventually took over the Fedra camp and killed every single member in a grueling, vindictive fashion to repay them for the wrath that they had enacted. This initial act also provides buildup for the audience to understand why she wants to kill Henry so badly. You see, it turns out that since the Fedra guards were so evil, there were numerous amounts of average to everyday people who were ratting out their neighbors for things like medicine or supplies, or just most likely not to be killed, and these people were called collaborators, and this particularly occurred once the resistance movement began to grow into an ever-looming threat against the powers that be. Kathleen begins the episode with a really great opening sequence attempting to get information out of prisoners that were once collaborators for Fedra. She discusses how these people were awful for getting so many of their friends, family, and other loved ones killed for things like medicine and food, like I just said. The performance here is great because you can truly feel the tension between the prisoners and Kathleen plus her guards, and what's more interesting, in my opinion, is the empathy that you feel for these prisoners who have been ratting out people this whole time. And I'm not sure if I would have been strong enough to not do something like that for food or medicine, or if somebody that I loved was dying, maybe I would be a collaborator. I don't know. That's why I think that scene is so good. I hope I'm never in that situation, but it is interesting to think about. So Kathleen continues to torment these people with her speech, but ultimately gets the information that she wants, which is Henry's whereabouts. But why does she want his location so badly? Henry was also part of the group of collaborators that were snitching on neighbors, but he did something even more serious. He handed over the leader of the resistance movement to Fedra, and that leader happened to be Kathleen's brother. Henry did this in order to acquire leukemia medication for Sam, his little brother, so that he could continue to live. Knowing the consequences, he did it anyways, and now Kathleen has it out for him. So who's the bad guy in this scenario? And while Kathleen is looking for Henry and Sam, the story shifts over to watching the brothers figure out various ways to hide. They end up hiding in an attic of a man named Edelstein, who is the doctor from episode 4 that Kathleen ends up shooting, and they are all waiting to figure out their next move to escape the city. And this is also around the time that we learn Sam, Henry's younger brother, is completely deaf. Initially, this wasn't very interesting to me, but the more I thought about it, I think this is a really smart move since we don't have gameplay inside of this story experience. And it works a lot better narratively because you have no control over anything that's attacking you. So we have to come up with other ways to build tension, and making Sam hard of hearing or mute or deaf is a very interesting way to bring about more tension. So about 11 days into their stay in the attic, Edelstein fails to return back to the hideout as he was captured and killed by Kathleen in episode 4, like I mentioned. Henry and Sam decide to move from this location, and this is actually where they kind of run into Ellie and Joel. They see their whole truck crash scene, the shootout, Ellie killing that guy, they see it all, and Henry knows that he has to meet with Joel because Joel's going to be wanted, and they can use each other to their advantage, as Joel will be the muscle and Henry will be the navigation system. Fast forward to our cliffhanger from episode 4, and we see Henry and Sam holding weapons over Ellie and Joel, and we are now back in the thick of it. Henry looks at Joel and basically lays it out that they need to work together, and that if Joel tries anything to hurt the two of them, he will kill Ellie and Joel right then and there. And this scene is actually kind of funny because Ellie's trying to get Joel to comply, but he's being a smartass. I just think it was really well done. And long story short, the two decide to pair up and use the tunnel system under the city, and Joel would essentially murder the crap out of any infected that come about in their way. While the resistance movement is still looking for Henry and Joel, the gang is actually underneath them, making their way to the other side. While they're traveling, they come across an abandoned hideout where people used to gather immediately after the infection had broken out, and this was a small area with a daycare and amenities for children, things like that. And there is this moment where Sam and Ellie are playing soccer, just like in the game, and for a moment they're just able to relax. The kids can be kids, and there is just this feeling of normalcy amongst everybody there. And while it might seem cliche to have these parts in a story like this so frequently, they are generally filled with great acting, cinematography, and emotional pacing that, while ultimately brief, the scenes are dense and layered with emotion. And while the game itself does a great job of this on its own, the show also provides a new level of depth simply from the story being told in a different light. So the gang makes their way out of the tunnels and are walking through a neighborhood, and it actually seems like they are home free, but a sniper begins to shoot at them from across the way. He is a shit shot, and Joel sneaks around back to take out this man, and then realizes that the person in the house was actually helping Kathleen by preventing Henry and Joel, mostly Henry, most likely, from making it out of the city. So Joel grabs the sniper rifle and begins watching Kathleen and her cronies approach Sam, Ellie, and Henry. They began their attack by driving an incredibly large truck that is plowing through cars and chasing our protagonist. Joel is firing for dear life at the driver, and he finally kills her while her dead body loses control of the truck and crashes into a nearby home. Kathleen approaches the now cleared pathway and calls for Henry to come out and surrender. He says he will if she lets the children live, and Kathleen responds with a brutal monologue about how children die every day, and that Sam was supposed to die, and that Ellie is with the other guys so that she's gonna get killed, and it's all very dark. Henry intervened with fate from her perspective, and now he has to pay the consequences for killing Kathleen's brother. Now, this is totally unimportant, but if I was Henry, I would have said, you know, the same logic can be applied to you. Maybe it was fate that I got the medicine, and maybe it was fate that I got your brother killed. Did you ever think that, you stupid bitch? And then I'd probably get shot in the head right then and there, but that's neither here nor there. Moments pass, and reluctantly Henry comes out from behind the car holding his hands up in a defeating posture. However, the truck that had crashed into the house moments prior now explodes and sinks into the ground. And if you remember anything from the previous episode, or what Henry tells Joel in this episode, is that Fedra has driven the infected underground, and the truck in this instance has crashed right over a nest. The infected start pouring out, chasing and killing everybody in sight. Henry, Sam, and Ellie are running and fighting for their lives, and Joel is in the sniper's nest killing everything around Ellie, essentially becoming her violent guardian angel. Ellie climbs through a small window of a van to hide and wait out the shitstorm encroaching upon their escape, when all of a sudden a tiny clicker, a little baby clicker like a toddler, it's probably older than a toddler, crawls through the window to kill her. And Ellie does make it out of the truck, looks over and sees Henry and Sam being attacked from underneath a car. So she runs over to them, stabbing each of the infected in the neck, preventing them from being bitten or scratched, or so we are led to believe. Now, the gang runs towards the entrance of the house where Joel is located and are seconds away from escaping when Kathleen emerges from the shadows, tells them to stop so she can kill Henry. But as fate would have it, the little girl clicker that was in the car with Ellie just a few seconds ago attacks Kathleen from behind. Joel collects our characters and they make their way to safety. The episode concludes with Henry, Sam, Ellie, and Joel resting in an old hotel room. Sam and Ellie are playing and reading comics. Joel is putting up a lot of resistance towards Henry and Sam, but ultimately does the right thing and invites them along their journey, which Henry agrees. All seems peaceful for once, and maybe our characters can finally catch the break that they deserve and make some headway on their journey to the other side of the country. But it's never that easy, is it? Sam reveals to Ellie that he has been bitten. Now it's only a matter of time before he turns and all hell breaks loose. Ellie tries to explain to Sam that she has medicine in her blood and cuts her hand and places it on his leg, trying to heal him with her perceived immunity. The sun rises, bringing a new day, and Ellie notices Sam acting strangely, sitting the other way towards the window. So she goes up to him to see, hey, maybe he's no longer infected, but as we all know, he was. Sam tackles Ellie and breaks down the bedroom door. The struggle ensues and Joel reaches for his gun, but Henry is that much quicker. Now pointing the gun at everybody but Sam, Joel begs for Henry to do the right thing. Time is running out and tensions are rising and finally, bang! Sam is dead. In a panic, Henry starts to regret his decision, pushing blame on everything and everyone around him. Joel is pleading for Henry to give him the gun, but Henry won't listen. He just killed the only person that has meant anything to him, a person he lived for entirely. They had made it alive this far, and this is how it ends. Henry takes his own life while Joel and Ellie watch in disbelief. They end up burying Sam and Henry outside of the hotel. Ellie places Sam's messaging board on his grave with the words, "I am sorry," written across. Joel is finally realizing how he also cares for Ellie, and there is only so much he can do in this fucked up world to protect her. But he doesn't want to experience the pain of losing a second daughter when he has already gone through this agony 20 years prior. To be quite honest with you, I think most of episode 5 was done better than the game. Having Sam be deaf, like I'd mentioned earlier, was a really great touch that added a ton of depth to the story, and I honestly had never really thought about it like that. Not only was life absolutely bananas in this post-apocalyptic world, but now you have an 8-year-old you have to keep alive while also fending for yourself. It's a very, very good challenge. The buildup with Henry and Sam inside of the game is a lot different, but I think it's a little bit better paced inside of the game, and it allows for such amazing gameplay scenes, but inside of a show, they just don't have time or resources to tell every single part of the story. There is a whole scene missing where Joel, Henry, and the kids kill basically everybody. They get chased down a bridge by an armored vehicle, only for Henry and Sam to betray Joel and Ellie and leave them to die. Joel and Ellie escape by the skin of their teeth by jumping off of a bridge into the river, where they eventually meet up with Henry and Sam again, and this is where they make their way into the tunnels to have to deal with some infected long before they get into trouble with the sniper's nest. The episodes with Henry and Sam were especially great. I just wish we could have seen a little bit more of that selfish survivalist nature that Henry has, because while we do catch glimpses of it here and there in the HBO version, there is really no fallout between these two duos. Initially, when they meet, Joel is very reserved, and it takes him a bit of time to trust Henry, and when Henry and Sam leave Ellie and Joel to die on the bridge, that was a pivotal moment that interrupts the trust that had been recently gained for those characters, and it doesn't really come back at all until they are forced to split up in the tunnels, where Joel is protecting Sam and Henry is protecting Ellie. There is no choice but to trust, and I suppose this is addressed a little bit in the show by making Henry a collaborator, and Joel doesn't want to work with a quote-unquote rat, but it's much more subdued than in the game, where we ping-pong rapidly between our emotional tone towards these characters and their brief time on the screen. Episode 6 actually really took me by surprise during the opening scene, where you are in a completely different location than the game. Sort of, kind of. It's a little complicated. And seeing those snow rabbits made me feel like we were skipping a lot of the story, and I won't get into all of that, but it just made me feel like we were jumping ahead. But for the most part, things were actually pretty bang on, and the emotional tug of war that Joel and Ellie go through was really heightened in this episode. And I think it's safe to say that this is the most emotional episode of the series by far, and tops Bill and Frank's episode by miles, simply because of the connection that we have garnered with Joel and Ellie. Act 1 begins with Joel and Ellie holding two Native Americans at gunpoint in their own home, attempting to find the location of Tommy and where he may be hiding. They tell him that there is a bad place past a specific river, which they call the River of Death. And Joel more or less gets the information that he needs, and they leave the house. And this scene is actually pretty cute because the old people are just like, they're not scared of him at all. And it's just, I don't know, it's a very playful scene. I think you'll enjoy it once you have the chance to see it if you haven't already. But as they are leaving, Joel starts to have a panic attack or something like that, maybe heart palpitations, which is very strange because this is not really something that's part of Joel's general character arc. But that, being said, it definitely makes him more interesting and well-rounded. Now, Joel and Ellie continue on and make their way past the River of Death, only to be ambushed by a gang of men and women on horses pointing rifles at them. Things get very tense when they have a dog that can sniff out infected people, and Joel is worried that Ellie will be ripped to pieces by this guard dog. The intensity swells as the dog starts sniffing Joel and Ellie, and shortly thereafter, the tension breaks and Ellie and the dog are playing in the snow. It was a very, very relieving moment. And this is when the man pointing the rifle at Joel's brain says, "You just bought yourself 10 more seconds. What are you doing here?" Joel reveals his identity and a woman steps forward. This woman you may know as Maria, Tommy's now wife. This group of people who were once Joel and Ellie's adversaries are now hustling them back to their encampment inside of a snow-covered valley surrounded by beautiful mountains, showing Joel and Ellie that a home welcomes them if they so choose. And as we saw in the previews of this episode and inside of the game, Joel and Tommy reconnect and they catch up with one another and share some intense, beautiful, yet disheartening words. The second act of the show is really just setting things up for Joel and Ellie's departure to the lab in Colorado. And while Joel and Ellie are split up, Ellie breaks away with Maria, where she learns about Joel's daughter Sarah and how she ultimately passed away 20 years ago. The directors chose to do some interesting things with Maria's character in the show that pushed me away from enjoying her at all. She seems to harbor so much animosity against Joel than she does in the video game. There seems to be a lot of blame and resentment towards him for having put Tommy through the ringer before she had even met Tommy in order to survive when things were bad post-outbreak. But Maria is forgetting that Tommy did terrible things too, and that while Joel might have been leading them down a pretty bad path, it was still Tommy's choice to participate in things the way that he did, killing innocent people and doing God knows what. This uneasiness that she feels towards Joel isn't really a good thing or a bad thing, but actually a sign of good writing, because getting the viewers severely attached to Joel and Ellie, and then anytime with somebody a hard stance or contrary opinion to our main protagonist is gonna piss you off, and it's supposed to. And since we don't have any gameplay inside of this show, because it's a show, you don't have the same obstacles to overcome, so they need to change them and pivot them into other ways that keep your engagement. So while ultimately I don't like Maria, I don't like her character, I don't like the way she is so hostile towards our, beloved duo, but I do like how she is written because she brings out those defensive emotions in me. And while Maria does continue to show Ellie around town and almost kind of takes a motherly role towards her, she takes her to the movies, and then we have one of the best scenes in the whole season so far, and that is Joel breaking down and confessing everything to Tommy. As we all know, Joel is a man of few words, and when he does speak, it's very purposeful. But all of this pain and violence that he has suffered through day after day has finally caught up with him, and he can't bear that burden anymore. So he tells Tommy everything about Ellie's immunity, Tess's death, Ellie saving Joel back in Kansas, and he even tells him about the panic attacks or the heart palpitations, whatever they are, not to mention the fact that he's just getting so old and he can't keep Ellie safe. Tears well up in his eyes and stream down his face, and Tommy knows that Joel isn't bullshitting him, as he's likely never seen his brother reveal so much emotion, so much soul in one sitting. The funny, or rather ironic, element of Joel's monologue is it's just really one long bloviated walk around the fact that he is just so devastated over Sarah's death. He's never recovered, and he has taken everything out on everybody around him, and now he is attached to Ellie, and he doesn't want to go through the loss of a second child, even if she is only a surrogate. Ultimately, Tommy agrees to take Ellie to the laboratory in Colorado, but unfortunately, Ellie overhears essentially the whole conversation between the two of them. She gets upset with Joel because she doesn't want to go with Tommy. The morning comes, and Tommy brings Ellie down to the stables to get their horse so they can begin their journey. Joel, of course, bumps into them, offering Ellie a choice with who she gets to travel with, and obviously she chooses Joel. And after 5 days and nights on horseback, they make it to the University of Eastern Colorado, but things are not looking right, as they enter the university. There's just nobody around. So after they enter what they think is the science building, they hear a noise and decide to go upstairs to see if perhaps an old scientist was hanging around, or maybe somebody could point them in the direction of the fireflies. It turns out it was just some monkeys monkeying about. Yes, I said that. Joel hears some commotion out of the window, and of course, trouble is brewing as raiders notice the horse outside and begin to close in on their soon-to-be victims. Our brave protagonists sneak out the back of the building and attempt to escape, but one of the raiders remains outside and starts attacking Joel. The raider swings a bat and misses, breaking it on a tree. Joel grabs him and places him in a chokehold, ultimately snapping his neck like a twig. Classic Joel. But we're not out of the woods just yet. That's like the third wood reference I've made in like the last 10 seconds. While Joel was holding onto the man's neck, he was stabbed with the butt of the baseball bat in the gut, and Joel pulls out this stump essentially from his abdomen and begins to bleed out. Ellie then cries out, "Joel!" reminding him that there are more bad guys chasing them and it was time to get the hell out. They ride off on their horse in the nick of time, of course, before remaining enemies can attack them. But even though they made it out and were in the clear, Joel is still severely bleeding out and collapses off the horse while unconscious. Ellie leaps off the horse to aid Joel, but there is only so much she can do to help him with recovery, and she is over his body weeping, begging Joel to come to. I will admit, I initially was confused when this episode began, as I thought we were skipping ahead to a whole different part of the story when I first saw the snow and the rabbits. I alluded to this at the beginning of this episode section. We will save the why behind that for what will likely take place in episode 8 or 9, but let's just say I didn't expect things to be as faithful in this episode as they were, and this was mainly in part due to the location and set dressing. That being said, while this episode was really good, it felt at times that certain things were just rushed. And you see, inside of the game, you actually meet Tommy at the waterfall and there is a raider attack. And during that time, Ellie is with Maria and they actually form a bond due to the fact that Maria tried to protect Ellie from all of these raiders. And the relationship between Joel and Maria, it is tense, but it's not nearly as bleak as it is in the show. We also have a bit where Ellie overhears Joel telling Tommy that Tommy is going to be escorting her to the lab, and Ellie steals a horse and rides off, and Joel and Tommy have to find her amongst all this chaos. And there is no emotional scene from Joel pouring his heart out to Tommy. That's very uncharacteristic of Joel in the game versus Joel on TV. To be honest, I enjoy both versions. This isn't a knock at the TV show. But after Ellie takes off with the horse and is eventually found, that's when we have our intense fight between her and Joel. The dialogue about how Ellie will never be as good as Sarah, they still cut deep in both the show and the game, but it seemed so abrupt and even a little forced, whereas in the game, we are tired and scared from chasing Ellie, and when she runs away, it brings tensions up that much more. Another part that felt rushed in the show was having Joel change his mind about taking Ellie to Colorado. Inside of the game, we have Tommy telling Maria that he is leaving to travel with this random girl to meet the Fireflies, and Maria gets visibly upset with Joel. And Maria does no such thing in this series because the whole whole scene doesn't exist. And you think it would make a lot of sense for her to argue with Joel since she already thinks he's a piece of garbage and has broken Tommy. Now she could confront him for that betrayal and conjure up something tumultuous like Joel is a coward for pawning this off on his brother who is a soon-to-be father, or you're having Tommy clean up your messes now after all you put him through. And the tension between Maria and Joel really could have been a contributing element to the catalyst of Joel changing his mind. Instead, it's just the next day and there he is at the stables. But this isn't the only thing that felt forced. I also felt like the scene at the lab in Boulder was not done justice or nearly as epic as in the game. Now, in the video game, after you arrive and explore the lab, you realize no one's around. You have a crazy shootout with raiders, which eventually leads to Joel getting very hurt and our protagonists escaping. And while I don't think that we need to have the whole shootout scene occur, it definitely would have been awesome if Joel's injury was recreated faithfully. The director of episode 6 has Joel being stabbed with the bat, right? But in the game, we have Joel being tackled off of a second-story balcony and falling onto a metal bar protruding from a piece of concrete. And this injury knocks Joel to his knees, and Ellie has to carry him out of the school, killing people while she's carrying this 56-year-old man. And I just don't think that the director understood the crucial element that this brought to the game. You are a powerhouse for so long, and then this one moment just cuts the legs right out of everything, and you're relying on a little girl to save the day, which she does. But I just thought, you don't really feel that when he's just getting stabbed, and you don't even see the stabbing. So while the production team did a great job bringing in these new elements to the story, changing things with setting, and making Joel much more emotional, there are just pieces of this part of the narrative that are much more impactful in the game simply due to the allowance of time, violence, or vulnerability to build toward a moment. So regarding next week's episode, I think it's a flashback, or it could be part of the DLC that is in The Last of Us Part 1. I still haven't played that yet. I have put it off for like 10 years, so I will be playing that before the episode comes out. I'm not sure if it's a flashback or if it's part of the game, but I will be playing it so I can learn more about it. But I would love to know more about, Ellie's history, her friends, what Fedra School is like, why her parents left her, how she has lived her life post-outbreak, how she got bitten. A lot of interesting information should come to light here, and I think it will just do justice for Ellie as a character, since we've seen her go through so much since she has met Joel, and even in the second game when she has to deal with Abby, so I'm quite glad we get to see her potentially more innocent state of mind. But there is so much unknown here, for me at least, and I don't know what's going to happen. So if this is DLC, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm honestly not really sure. But besides that, we have a ton to look forward to. I can't wait to see how Ellie handles taking care of Joel now that he's injured. Will she become captured like she is in the game? Will Joel come to her rescue? Will the writers and directors take us on a completely different journey away from the psychopaths who want to chop Ellie into a million tiny bits? Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave your comments down below that like button, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.